Wonderful. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm very happy to join you here in your seminar. And I hope you can see the slides. Now, the building you see on this slide is actually the building I'm in right now, just at the back end. And it starts getting a bit darker here. It's been gray all day long, so I hope you can see me and everything just fine. My talk is on German neologisms at the institute where I'm working at, Bridging Tradition and Future. And I've been working here for over 20 years in the field of lexicography and lexicology. And I've been lucky to combine both here at this institution, so we could start to develop a few new things as well, some of which I will introduce you to. My talk has 3 parts. And I wonder, Judith, if we should have a little break after each part for a discussion, or if you'd rather have the discussion at the end.
We normally have the discussion at the end, but okay, perhaps it could be better if at least asking if someone has a question after each part.
Because it's quite a lot, I think, quite a lot of information to take in. Okay, so I'll do a bit of looking back how we treated and documented neologisms and at the Leibniz Institut für Deutsche Sprache. And I'm going to show you a new modular resource that we've been developing right now. And I'm going to say something on the research we are conducting and the cooperation we have. Looking back, we've been looking at neologisms since 1997 specifically, and we also have been documenting German neologisms lexicographically since the early 2000s. And we do have an online and a print dictionary that's a specific neologism dictionary, and it covers 3 decades from the 1990s, the 2000 and 2010. It's a dictionary that is compiled, or that was compiled corpus-based, the first neologism dictionary for German that was compiled corpus-based, and it has a retrospective approach. At the time this was established, we always followed a definition that could be translated as a neologism is a new lexical unit or a new meaning of an established lexical unit that emerges, spreads, and is generally accepted as a linguistic norm within a certain phase of language development in a speech community. It's quite a vague definition, but I always wanted to include it here because we have made some changes to that as we follow today. In 2004, we published the first print dictionary for neologisms, and it covered the neologism from the 90s. There was a team of 4 people at the time, lexicographers, who worked on that, and it was published here at our institute as well. When you open a book, just any random page, I decided to go for an example that's easy to understand, like internet shopping or internet site. You have an entry example here that shows, it looks pretty traditional because it's a print dictionary. It has, first of all, the type of lexeme and when it occurred in the 90s, in the mid-90s of the 20th century. You have details on spelling and pronunciation. You have a definition, shopping by ordering over the internet. You have synonyms like home shopping and online shopping. You have corpus examples, and you have some details on grammar such as word class, gender declension, word formation productivity as well. So that's basically how you could imagine a very ordinary entry. In 2006, the same dictionary went online as a digital resource. It was published in a dictionary portal called Ovid. It is totally free. You can access that without needing an account, and it covers the neologisms of the 3 decades that I mentioned. And in total, there are more than 2,100 entries so far. So if you want to try that one out at some point, you have the address here as well. As a portal, it covers a lot of dictionaries. Judith mentioned a lexico. That's the first general German corpus-based dictionary that we compiled. I was part of the team at the time. I didn't work in the neologism field right at the beginning, so I was a member of the lexico team. We also have the Paronym Dictionary, a dictionary of confusables that I was chief editor of. We also have a dictionary of proverbs and idioms, of speech act verbs, for example, of foreign words, and different discourse dictionaries as such, and also bibliographies. So this is the big portal, and just by the color code, you can identify the dictionary you're browsing in. So it's quite comfortable to do so. So neologism online lexicography has quite a tradition. It covers new lexemes, for example, bubble tea, which isn't that new, but I thought it's an example lots of people can understand. It also covers words with new senses, such as the German word Tunnel, which is a tunnel, and it means stretched earlobe. When these earrings came into fashion, that stretched the earlobe. And also technical terms that are spreading to everyday communication. Just think of the COVID term incidence rate. That would be incidence. Although it's been a regular term in statistics, lots of people only came across when it occurred together with COVID, for example. As an online entry, it looks quite different from the print dictionary, of course. Each entry has a little sense identification here, bubble tea as a tea drink. It says that's a neologism of the 10th decade. You have, from today's perspective, an awfully looking frequency graph, really. You have the type of neologism, you have spelling and pronunciation, you have the occurrence when it came up in the German language, and you have details on meaning and usage, a meaning definition, a rather long one, and corpus examples and typical constructions as well, all taken from corpus analysis. And then you have two different sections as well on grammar and further information. So this is the old dictionary that we have, which is still online and which covers the 3 decades, really. And then came COVID. What happened? 3 years ago, I joined the neologism team, and that was right the time when we had the COVID pandemic, and it was a phase with very high lexical input. We just collected them, like in a really opportunistic kind of way, and we collected more than 2,500 new lexemes that came up during that time. So it's an enormous amount of new lexemes, which we were hardly be able to work in such a detail, really. We also had a lot of word suggestions from the public, because this was vocabulary that caught attention from the public quite a bit. But what we didn't have was the relevant corpus data yet, because we're always 1 year behind. When we acquire new texts for investigation, we are a year behind. So that was really difficult, new words coming up, and we didn't have the corpus data to have thorough investigations. So what we did is each term got a tiny definition and just a corpus citation that we found online usually, either from official websites or newspaper online, things like that. And it also got a stamp date when we discovered the term. So that was all we could handle. But I think we have the most comprehensive list here at the IDS of the COVID terminology. So when you look at the COVID terms, it is full of loan words taken from English, like lockdown, social distancing, and super spreader. It has a lot of loan words that receive German word formation processes, like Boosterimpfung is a booster vaccination, or to Zoom, you put a German ending to make it a verb, for example. Or compounding is a very productive means of creating new words, like the COVID warning level or the mask opponents. We had a lot of new abbreviations, very technical usually. We had a lot of medical terms that I mentioned, like R-value or incidence rate. And we had very creative German people creating things like to be tired and angry, wütend, or to be tired of the pandemic, pandemüde, things like that. And a number of metaphors occurred as well, like wave breaker or tsunami, infection tsunami. And when you look at the COVID terms in total, you discover that the discourse is very complex and full of sub-discourses. If I were to describe it in detail, I have to pick out the testing strategy, for example, or the vaccination campaign, or the conspiracy scene, which was quite big in Germany. And the discourse of COVID is also characterized by very fast lexical changes, by a terminology that comes from statistics, from medical areas, with different topical focus on different socio-political debates and positions. And the neologisms that occurred within the discourse play a very central part as indicators in discourse development. And I would say that the COVID vocabulary and the COVID discourse had a huge impact on what happened with the dictionary afterwards, because I was asked to take over the dictionary as the chief editor. And I said, I'm only going to do it if I can change a few things. And because I was so influenced by the COVID pandemic and what happened with the terms and how I discovered a few things, I wanted to change quite a bit that I wanted to show you. Yeah. So COVID was like a cutoff point that made me aware of the old neologism dictionary has a lot of really helpful information when it comes to linguistic information, but there's always a bit missing when it comes to controversial terms, for example. And since a lot of new neologisms are very much crisis-related, things just wouldn't do by providing them with an ordinary definition and with ordinary linguistic information. They needed more, I thought. Okay, that will be the end of my first part, the looking back part. Are there any questions so far?
I don't know if it's a question, but you said that this very good definition of neologism you said that's the old one. We have another one. So in this old definition, there is something that it's very interesting for us. We have spent a few months, more than a year, trying to work on computation and neology. And this word, when you say that the neology is a word that emerges and you don't say appear, because we normally, and the bibliography says appear, as if words appear, and after this it starts the process of institutionalization, and that's not true. What we are fighting is that it appears, it disappears, it appears, it disappears, and in one moment it is from, it's outside, below the surface, and then emerges. So from now is when you can say that the unit is born. Is that the idea you have when we use this verb emerge, to avoid to put the born of a neologism in a different place than the first occurrence, which maybe it's not important?
I don't think I thought about much about the differences of appear and emerge, really. The only struggle that I had with the old definition, I will come back to that, is that something had to be defined as a new linguistic norm, which I found difficult to judge on, or how to measure that. And what I found difficult as well is that it had to spread and to be well known among the language community as well. I will come back to that later as well, because I think that doesn't solve the main purpose of the dictionary as a consultation, because once it's established as linguistic norm in a speech community, people don't really look it up anymore because they are familiar with the term. And I wanted to change that. I wanted to combine the use and the function of a neologism dictionary together with new words emerging or appearing, and people look them up when they are unfamiliar with the concept or the term as such. So I wouldn't make much of a difference between appear or emerge at this point, really. Yeah.
Okay, and when you say that is accepted as a linguistic norm, is it as a linguistic norm or as a linguistic form?
Normative, yes.
Okay, because we, in our context, we would say accept it as an existing form.
Okay, I like that.
It's quite different.
It is quite different, yeah. I suppose there are so many definitions out there. Let's see, I have both at the end to compare, and then let's see what happened to that.
Okay.
So COVID changed quite a bit for me. And I said, I want to have a different neologism resource. And some people ask me, why? Why do you want a new resource? You've got one. It's there. Just fill it up with new terms from the 20s now, the new decade. And I said, well, the first reason is I want to include linguistic features and social cultural history in the dictionary as such. Because when you ask German people, particularly young people, how many of these neologisms of the 90s can you describe precisely? And I'm not sure if you know all of them. So it's a pager, it's call by call. Gaukbehörde is an institution where you can look up your Secret Service file from the Eastern German part. Hypertext document, and a handheld, a BlackBerry or something, the gadget at the time. A lot of young people wouldn't know what some of these terms mean, because even if they look them up with the definition, they sometimes are still confused and cannot quite describe what it is. And they cannot put that in relation to the technological advancement or the historical events that are behind that. And so these are quite difficult from today's perspective when they are only described linguistically. When you look at the neologisms that appeared or emerged after 2020, and we can look back almost 5 years now, you can realize that we have the COVID crisis, we have the inflation crisis, we have the war in Ukraine, we have the capital attack, we have the energy crisis, the migration crisis, and of course, above all, we have the climate crisis. And there's hardly any discourse here that doesn't end in crisis. And so are the neologisms that belong to those crises. Most of them can easily be attributed to one or the other of these crises. And some of them are highly interrelated as well, like the inflation crisis and the war in the Ukraine and the energy crisis are quite tightly interknitted. So lots of crisis-related new terms. The second reason why I wanted a new neologism resource is I wanted to exploit the opportunities of an online presentation. The old dictionary dates back to the early 2000s when we developed the ideas of that. It is quite similar to some of the ideas we developed in eLexico, and they were adapted here for the neologism dictionary. But today we can do a lot more. We have dynamic presentation options. I wanted to include more user choices of how I display information. I wanted interactive elements. I wanted adaptive elements and a responsive design. Please do not try to look at this portal from your mobile device. It looks awful. You can only use and have a look at this from with a laptop, notebook, or a computer screen, really. So but most young people would like to look things up on their mobile phone, really. So all these options that we have today should be exploited. The third reason why I wanted a new neologism resource is I wanted to focus on users' interests. It has been a domain or a field that had received much attention in the past 10 or 15 years, the users' interests for online dictionaries in particular. And we know so much more about the user today, even in advance before you design a dictionary. What we did is we looked at some internet forums, for example. They were full of questions such as, what does YOLO mean? And there are people asking in a specific way, and there are people answering in a specific way. And you get a lot of information, because if you check some of the neologism of the recent years, you know exactly what users inquire. They ask for the meaning, for example. They ask for example of usage. They ask for differences to other lexemes. They ask for abbreviations. They ask for the origin, the concept behind the word, the historical events or backgrounds that come together with the new words, the appropriateness of some of the terms in conversation, the style, register, and domain, the spelling and the pronunciation, for example. But we also figured out what people never ask. They never ask about the syllabication of new words. They never ask about the word formation processes behind that, so purely linguistic information. They never ask for the word formation productivity, really, and they never ask what type of neologism is this. That doesn't really mean that we can just skip the information, but we can think about where to position it, because some of these that are not inquired are quite dominant and occur at the first spot when you open the old dictionary, syllabication, for example, and the type of neologism. But people usually are not interested in that. So we thought about either skipping or slightly hiding it somewhere where it's not as dominant or where it doesn't appear at first. So that had a huge impact what to do with the new dictionary. And the last reason, the fourth reason, is I wanted to combine the documentation of lexemes with browsing options on the subject of neology in general. And I also wanted to create a new contrastive synonym dictionary. As you said, Judith, I'm very keen on investigating lexical relations, and synonymy is just one of them. So I will show you that we developed a new dictionary as such with a new central focus on linking linguistic and encyclopedic knowledge, with a big emphasis on contextual interconnection between neologism, the concept it designates, the background, the use, and the discourse. And I wanted to combine the documentation of language and history. You can't find that online yet. With a bit of luck, we will have it by the end of the year. I cannot do the programming. I did the development of it, the conceptual ideas behind that with my team. We also developed a dashboard, which will hopefully be published next year. It contains content related to the project and to neologism as such. And you can learn about the current development of the vocabulary. It has podcasts, publication statistics. I will show you more in a minute. And we also developed ideas on a new synonym dictionary, only synonyms related to neologisms, though. It's not an ordinary synonym dictionary. It is a dictionary for new synonyms. It is contrastive in nature. It's corpus-based, descriptive in dynamic, and hopefully we will have it in 2 years' time. So very ambitious project here. Let's have a look. So these are the three components that make up the new resource, and the new resource is called IDS Neo 2020 Plus, New Words in Use. And I start with the dictionary to explain a few things here. Let's take the example of greenflation. So it's rising prices because of the energy transition from fossil fuel to more renewable energy. Okay, it's been a big issue in Germany, and it's a loan word taken from English, and that would be an entry with 3 tiles here, 3 different sections on development, origin and development, background knowledge, examples, and patterns are the 3 tiles here. It starts with a definition or a paraphrase, and then it has synonyms and information on the word class. If you want more information on grammar as such, you just press the arrow here. Then it has these 3 sections here as tiles, and the first tile, origin and development, contains a number of information, when it occurs, where it was taken from English. You also have frequency graphs that are interactive. You can click on those. They are not interactive on my PowerPoint here because this is only the conceptual idea. It's not the final product I can show you here. And then you have information on how we have variation in the pronunciation. Some people say greenflation instead of greenflation, so that varies still a bit. And it will also contain information on spelling variation, or if it's fully integrated in the grammar patterns and paradigms, for example. If you move to background information, you get much more information, what I said about linking linguistic and historical facts or encyclopedic facts, like subject areas. Greenflation is being used in topics like politics, economy, environment, and energy, and it's part of discourses such as climate crisis and energy crisis. It's also similarly used as words like fossil inflation or climateflation. And you have an interactive timeline here that you can click on, and it tells you what happened at these events, for example, and the historical background. And if I would scroll down here, you also have a section on public discussion and controversy with two differing positions towards greenflation as such. A political issue on the one hand side, and how it's been perceived as something really bad because people can't pay their energy bills anymore. So, which has a social political impact. And the two positions are being contrasted and described and provided with examples here. And the final tile would be examples from the corpus. We have newspaper examples, examples taken from social media and from online information. And further down, if you would scroll down there, typical patterns with verbs, with nouns, and with adjectives. If you look at, I just circled that in, at the pin, that is a function I would like to point out, because if you want more information on one page, you can basically just fix the pin of one section and then click on another section on another tile, and they will open underneath. So if you want to leave out one, you can just basically fix two tiles together. We also have at the top a certain change of view. This is the tile view. And if you click on that and you want only the text view, then it would change into this. Always at the top right end, you see, you can change back to the, now it's disturbing me.
Wenn du hier drauf gehst, dann hast du ja die richtige Präsentation auch mit Animationen, ne?
It's, yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah. So you always have, you can always change back to the tile view as such. And here you have everything underneath as a pure text view. And you have a navigation menu where, similar to, I'm sure you've seen many, such menus, and you can just go to the kind of areas you're interested in if you wanted to. So quite a dynamic change of use for the users according to what you like. Okay, so that would be an idea of the dictionary as such, and I'll turn to the dashboard. Please take in mind, it is only a screenshot from the conceptual design idea. That does not mean that the graphics or visualizations you see here are as they will be in the end. It's only exemplary and illustrative. You will find very different data formats from the project and the dictionary. It's a combination of both. You'll have a lot of statistics which are interactive. You find the latest publications there or reports on studies, podcasts as such, citizen science campaigns like Your New Word, current discourses and debates, new dictionary entries, the introductory video, etc. Now let's have a look what you get when you click on some of the features here. For example, the podcasts might look something like that. The first is actually one we already have, given by Annette Kloser-Kückelhaus. The rest are just illustrative. They don't really exist, but that's what they could look like. You could just have a collection of podcasts that refer to some recent developments and some specific neologisms. Okay. The campaign Your Word has been existing for quite some time. People can just type in their words, the date when they discovered it, where they discovered it, type in any kind of comments, their name if they want, and send it to us. We don't get that many. After COVID was finished, the pandemic, it really slowed down. We have roughly about 40 per year, which isn't that much. And most of it is really quite some creations that people come up with. They would like to see in the dictionary, but it doesn't really exist. So we'll keep that. New words in discourses is something for those who know that I am also part of the Neoli group, they can guess why this is here. As most words can be grouped or categorized into specific discourse at the time, a lot of journalists come up and say, what are all the new words that are connected to the war in Ukraine or the climate crisis? They want specific collections of specific domains or discourses. And that is just one of those examples that we could do. So if you click on energy crisis, where everything is being collected here, it could look something like this. The new terms could be arranged alphabetically, for example, with the most dominant terms being highlighted, and you have frequency graphs underneath in comparison for the energy transition, gas price cap, and energy price cap, for example. Or if you want to show it chronologically, you can have a slight description on top of the energy crisis between 2020 and 2023. And then you can have all the lexemes being listed and underneath a timeline when they occurred, for example, roughly during that time. And when you click on one of those neologisms, you always have a citation from the corpus there. So lots of other options here, for example, show the same words according to discourse fields, because all the words collected here can also be categorized according to words designating specific situations or political measures or effects, or any terms that have to do in the context of the Ukraine war as well. So there are different ways of categorizing, describing, or rearranging according to the user's needs. I cannot promise how detailed this is going to be, since our workforce is also very limited, and arranging such views and displays is quite time-consuming, really. Yeah? So let's see how far we get. But these are ideas that are possible, and they can be presented in the dashboard there, for example. Also, some words are easily arranged in domains and topics. At the EuroLex, we had Merle presenting something on dating terms. Lots of new dating terms, all taken from English, and lots of people are interested in comparing those because they can't really make out the differences between benching, breadcrumbing, and so on and so forth. Or terms that had to do with a flood we had in 2021, or all the new forms we had that end in inflation, like climateflation, fossilflation, greenflation, skimpflation, shrinkflation, all these terms. And we also have a lot of new terms that refer to retirement, really, because the payment system and the welfare system are about to collapse due to demographic changes, and we need a lot of reforms here concerning retirement schemes, really. So these are not really discourses, but domains and topics people are interested, and you can always rearrange that. And while the dictionary only has specific entries and you look up information for one specific term, this is the platform where you can actually look for domains together with lots of terms, so collections of terms, and that makes it a complementary part to the dictionary as such. Okay, the last resource, that is the last component of the new guide, is new synonyms and contrast. And for those of you who have been to the EuroLex conference as well, we had a poster there, because lots of new terms come in pairs. As we are quite willing to take in borrowings from English, at the same time, it happens that we translate those as loan translations, and then we have pairwise new words, which are competing as well with each other. And there are lots of concerns in language forums where they say, oh, where can I look these new words up? Is one word preferred over the other, for example? Or what's the difference between them? Some people might ask. Or do both items refer to the same thing? These are quite realistic questions that you can read in language forums. And that gave us the idea of, once we actually describe these new terms, we can also have them in contrastive descriptions to answer those questions. Oops, hang on. Yeah, the You see the paronym dictionary now? Judith, do you see a screenshot from the paronym dictionary?
Yeah, but there was someone who raised the hand. It was when you were talking about greenflation. It was Yingfei Liu. I don't know if now it's a good moment to see.
Yep.
Yingfei?
I do not
left.
Yes, okay.
She was standing with the man, right? But now she's not there. So yes, we can see that. It's
Okay.
little, very little, but we can see it.
Okay. Just to give you the idea, it is in the portal, the dictionary portal. It's the paronym dictionary, and it serves as a model for the new contrastive synonym dictionary. It contains words such as effektiv and effizient, and everything is put in a specific way to be contrasted with. And I'm going to explain this with the new dictionary as well. So this is only the model. Since we've got this, we figured it might serve pretty well to describe neologistic synonyms as well. The paronyms are also called dynamic and contrast. It was a dictionary we built between 2015 and 2021. And it is quite flexible in comparison. It has all the senses listed horizontally, and then you have the two terms, and the senses that are identical have a color scheme, as you see, and they are positioned right underneath. And the senses that are differing are not underneath, colored as well in gray in this case. And you can rearrange the senses according to your needs, according to frequency, or according to differences, etc. So I'm not going to go into detail with this one. It's free. You can have a look at this in the portal if you wanted to. But it's the model for the new synonyms in contrast we have in mind. So it looks quite similar. We have the most frequent term on top. For example, if you compare lockdown to shutdown, two loanwords we have in German from the COVID pandemic. Lockdown is a new lexeme entering in 2020. Shutdown is a new sense, not a new lexeme. And then the order of lexical items, I just said the more frequent one is on top. And the time of occurrence is given in brackets. Then we have the two senses that are similar, that are quite synonymous in this case, closing down of everything. We also have a tag new sense for the shutdown, which has a new sense. It's not a new term as such. We have the color code that identifies them as being synonymous. And we also have further senses for shutdown, which refer to US politics and to computers that you, I'm lacking the word, when you close down the computer and you shut the computer down. Okay, so the senses as such listed here. What else do we have? We have a sense label and a domain given for each sense, so you can easily browse and have a look at this. We have a dynamic shuffle. If you click on the differences, the tiles are rearranged, having the differences shifting to the front and the similarities to the right in this case. And we also have a menu where you can click on the tiles you want to have a closer look at. Here, for example, I want to check out two senses. For example, the closing down for lockdown and the household closing down for the US. In shutdown, and when you click on both, then a new view opens where you have both listed in detail, for example, with a larger definition, a domain and a thematic reference, and collocations that are listed side by side, so you can easily find out what's the subject or the object together with in a sentence, or who is affected by lockdown, who is affected by shutdown. What do you do with lockdown? The verbs go in there. What do you do with shutdown? How is a lockdown being characterized? The adjectives go in there. And what is associated with lockdown? And you have some nouns that occur within the same sentences. So these are collocational analysis where we manually designate basically or attribute according to syntactic frames or semantic frames and to the function and context as such. And then you have a little explanations as a background information. But by doing so, you can compare side by side each information and find out the differences. This is just a random example. It makes more sense when you have slight nuances in meaning, when you see, oh, some of the terms don't have adjectives at all, or the verbs differ slightly. So that makes it interesting to compare side by side. At the moment, we are compiling some dictionary entries here. So by the end of the year, we will hopefully have 20 examples working like this, but you have to be patient. It's not online for quite a while. Okay, so that would be the end of part 2. Lots of new resources, and we just have to be patient because it takes some time to program it and to launch it then online. And when I turn to corpus and methods, you will find I'm not quite sure yet how to manage all these resources, but we have to take bits and bobs from each entry and rework with these for different resources in a different way. Are there any questions? I only see a few people here, so I do not know who raises the hand. Judith has to help me.
Yes, there is Vincent who wants to give you a question.
Hello, Petra.
Hello.
Thank you for even if the presentation is not finished. I don't know, perhaps my question is, I should ask my question after your third part. I think it is related to the first part you presented. It's a theoretical question. I wonder which criteria you used in order to detect some neological compounds, because in German it's I think very problematic to say this compound is a neologism and the other one is not. It doesn't have, in my opinion, to do with the new form, because you can have a new form. For example, Corona-Behandlung. Corona-Behandlung, treatment for corona is a new form, but it has no Neuheit effect. There is no touch of neologism inside, because you can have the same compound for every disease. So for the compounds, does it need to be metaphoric in one way, or what are the semantic criteria to say, okay, this compound is a neologism and the other one not, and the both of them are new forms?
I will answer this question, exactly this question, in the next last part.
Sorry.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's about dictionary inclusion criteria now.
Yes.
Okay. I think it's not as tricky as you might have sketched it. But I'm being very pragmatic in some respect. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's say that I am very impressed by these new options for collecting and presenting neologisms. I mean, collecting neologisms that are synonyms of existing words. I never heard about that. I never thought about that, or putting them together by discourse. There's excellent ideas, and if you allow us, we might try to copy you.
Okay. Okay. Then I switched to corpus and methods. I said it's corpus-based. We've been working corpus-based for over 20 years now here at our institute. The main source is the German reference corpus, and it has a search and analyzing tool, Cosmas 2. It contains the biggest digital collection of German texts, currently around 60 billion words, and most of it is publicly accessible. You can see from the chart here that the green parts are publicly accessible, and only a tiny yellow bit on top can only be used for internal purposes here. Still, most of these proportionally are broadsheets, newspapers. We have some journals, we have Wikipedia texts, we have parliamentary speeches, a bit of Twitter texts, and some fiction. But it is still a bit overloaded with newspaper texts. It's just the way it is. The advantage is we can always build out of the corpora that we have our own virtual corpus. So I can say, give me all the newspapers from 2020, and I can put them into my own individual corpus and save it and do my research in there. Or give me only text from specific genre or things like that. So it's quite flexible in that respect. And when you see the map here on the right-hand side, there are some areas which are not covered, but the densely populated areas are basically covered, and it includes German, as in Germany. We also have Austrian and Swiss German texts in there to a large proportion. So you can also do regional analysis if you're interested in Austrian language use, for example. Okay. We use two different methods. We have some corpus-driven analysis, for example, when we use collocation analysis, but we also use corpus-based methods if we search for synonyms, citations, where we target the corpus and say, let's see if these two words occur within a span of 2 sentences, for example. So then we specifically ask with an idea in mind. So that's corpus-based. We do qualitative analysis, looking for patterns through collocations. That's quite common in semantics and lexicography. We do quantitative analysis with different tools, with frequency charts, for example, where we can check peaks or time of occurrences, or how both or 2 or 3 words behave simultaneously. And we have started using word embedding for lexicological research, for example, looking for synonyms for domains and discourses. It is not an established lexicographic tool yet. The German version of word embedding is called Dericovex. It's also freely available, and there are not many publications on how to use the tool, so we have to figure that out by ourselves, and we've started doing that in the project a bit. So I consider those complementary tools. Sometimes the collocation works best. In other times, the word embedding helps us to detect synonyms more easily. So it depends on the type of word really we're looking at. We also use additional sources such as internet and social media, for example, quotes from government official websites to explain political measures such as equity pension or the gas price cap. We also look for references of official institutions and organizations such as the Consumer Protection Organization for the term shrinkflation, or the Child Protection Association for kidfluencer, for example. Because I said we have corpus examples from newspapers, online and social media, so different genre really that we want to include. And we wanted to detect also new candidates which are not in the news reports. One example would be toefish, so tofu and fish. When you look in the corpora, for example, you have 0 hits for toefish, but when you check online, you have a lot of toefish really in social media, recipes on how to prepare it, and lots of pictures as I've provided here. So there is a term not covered in the newspaper text, but quite frequently occurring when you simply Google it or use social media to check it. So we do need additional tools or additional identification for new words as well. Now we come to the inclusion criteria, and we have to juggle between theory and practice. The lexicographic practice is mostly influenced, I must say that, by ways of feasibility, really. The extent and form of details we have to include for the dictionary entries, for the dashboard, and for the future synonym dictionary. So 3 resources that want information. The user group we have in mind is the interested public. That differs from the old neologism dictionary, where the main user group were linguists, specialists, students of linguistics, for example. And we know from emails, for example, what they want to find, what kind of information they want, etc. The methodology and data of neologism detection, the extraction and the analysis, all this takes time. We have a semi-automatic detection of candidates. We have a manual editing process. We have corpus linguistic approaches to analyzing. We search in social media. We search online. All this is time consuming, of course. And I do need to let you know, our workforce at the moment is 1 full-time position, that is me, and 2 part-time PhDs, okay? So that puts things into perspectives. We sometimes have the support by students. We have interns coming in, helping us willingly. So that's the practice on one hand, and what can we do within a year? So we have practical guidelines for orientation, and they somehow correspond or clash, depending on how you look at it, with the theory that there is. There are lots and lots of definitions of neologism, and depending on which one you pick, you can work on very large definitions for your dictionary or make it smaller, have more entries in or have less entries, depending on what definition you choose. Also, how strict are your linguistic criteria defines on how many words can you manage to compile for the dictionary each year. So that makes it quite difficult sometimes to judge. So what do? That is the list as I receive them annually, usually around January or February from the preceding year, because as I said, the corpus data are 1 year behind when we have them ready to for inspection. So that's the list of 2023. And we changed the procedure because for the old dictionary, it was pick out any new token that has been in the corpus for 5 years, consecutive years. And I said it's a retrospective approach, and I wanted to cover the terms more quickly when they appear or emerge in the language. So we changed the procedure of 2 consecutive years. That's why you have a sudden jump in how many candidates you have between 2020 and 2021, so many more candidates. I get the list. It's based on the German reference corpus only, so mainly newspaper. And I have to go through them manually, really. So that's semi-automatic. If you want to read about the filtering process and the algorithms, really, there are 2 publications on how to do that for the old dictionary. So the list contains lots of columns here. For example, column B is the new token, the candidate as such. Then we have the absolute frequency. We have the likelihood of being a proper name. We have proportion of regions such as North, South, Southwest, but also Germany, Swiss, and Austrian texts. The log likelihood score in comparison between periods. An M score, we have the year of attestation, 2 consecutive years, the maximum frequency in a year, the year with the maximum value, and frequency in specific years preceding that time that I'm quite interested in. So lots of information that I need. In my first editorial round, what I do is I pick out the proper names, which are plenty in there, because a new football player or a new politician, and there it is. Pick those out. I pick out the hashtags that we have. I pick out COVID-related terms because we put them in that separate list usually. I pick out words that seem to be new, but we had in the preceding year, because sometimes they have a different spelling or occur as in their plural instead of their singular form. I also pick out synonym variant and morphological variants like Deutschland-Ticket and D-Ticket would be morphological variation of one and the same thing. I pick out inflectional forms like the heating system law and Heizungsgesetz versus Heizungsgesetzes. It's a genitive form here, so that goes together with one. I pick out trend words, which I assume will disappear really quickly, like spy balloon. And I mark the discourses at the same time, and I provide comments. And that will be just the first round. Rough, quick and dirty. And it takes a long time because there are roughly 4,000 candidates in the list. And I detect spelling mistakes, which are quite plenty as well. Okay, then I have a second round. Everything that's labeled new, shows some spelling variation. For example, hyphenation is quite common, or putting compounds together without hyphenation. And I need to find those because they can occur at the bottom of the list and quite down there when I reach the 2000 or 3000. So I need to look for those. Morphological variants, again, because as I said, it's a long list and I never know where they really occur. Inflectional forms, again, because there are quite plenty. The heating plants in the nominative plural, in the dative plural, in the singular nominative and the genitive form, lots of inflectional words. And just to give you an idea, to find those forms, I just systematically look for the beginning of a word, like heights for heat, and I go through the entire list and check, are there spelling variation, morphological variation, inflectional variation, so I can put them together into one entry, really. I pick out the semantically semi or transparent word. I mark those. Are they semantically transparent? Can I read Klimaschutz Sofortprogramm and know what it means by dividing it up into its elements, like instant climate program? Or will people be able to understand spy balloon instantly? And I mark those. I picked the synonyms. They are very difficult because you can imagine that photovoltaic system and solar generator might not appear right underneath. And if you don't know the synonym, if you don't have it in mind, it's really hard to search for those. So it's quite difficult. The word embedding helps here a bit. And I search for specific word classes because most new candidates are nouns, but we also want to include the verbs and the adjectives, of course. So I need to find those specifically. And I look for word formation. So we have, for example, Bürgergeld, citizens' welfare income, and I look for all the products that are formed. So I have groups or bundles of related terms as well. Abbreviations, I look for those. Sometimes they are explicitly written out, spelled out, and sometimes they appear as abbreviations. I try to find both forms. And that was the second round of manual editing. What do I do later on? I face a lot of challenges because this list, of course, doesn't give me new senses, only new forms. So that's really difficult. It's also difficult to identify new expressions, metaphors, or idioms if all the components are old terms, just set together in a new way. So that's difficult as well. And as I said before, it's difficult to identify words frequently used in spoken data, which we don't have really, or in social media, like toefish, for example. We wouldn't have that. So it's very hard. How do I cope with the challenges? Again, it has to be in an opportunistic kind of way. Potentially new words and senses used in spoken language or social media. When you work with neologism, you start to develop a specific ear and eye. You listen, you read, you learn, and you detect things. And the word proposal by the public is sometimes helpful. And lots of people approach me internally here in my institution as well. They send me some proposals, but it is not systematic because it's difficult. That is the suggestion of a personal word, a new word, as it is at the moment. As I said, roughly 40 suggestions per year. It's been about 200 or 300 a year when we had COVID, so much more interesting facts at the time then. The practical guidelines. We've got an idea of what to include because we have a concept of the dictionaries. We have the automatic or semi-automatic detection for the list of candidates. We have manually annotated lists, still too many. Even if I have sorted some of the cases out, I still have between 1,500 and 2,000 words left. I have the corpus and analyzing tools, and I have my very tiny editorial team. I still need a definition to handle all those, right? What is a neologism apart from a new word, phrase, and sense? That is the old definition again. a new lexical unit or new meaning of an established lexical unit that emerges at a certain stage of language development in a speech community. It spreads and is generally accepted as a linguistic norm. Okay, that means new words are fully lexicalized, and we have a lot of attestations already. That also meant for the old dictionary a retrospective lexicographic approach. New entries are not considered when finally documented, really. And the dictionary purpose here is only that of documentation, never of consultation, because by the time they are in the dictionary, they are fully established and accepted by the community. People don't look up words that are established as much as in a neologism dictionary as the words they are unfamiliar with. So I wanted to change that. And I said we investigated what do people expect when they look up new words. And the language forums are full of neologisms and what people ask. What do people understand by greenflation? The term is being used again and again, and everybody uses this in a different context. And I'm really confused, things people say. What's NFT, for example? And the new definition was based on studying forums quite a bit, because it was the prerequisite for the entire lexicographic concept. We needed the insight into users' needs. Users address their specific linguistic difficulties with new words in those forums. They tell you what they don't understand when it comes to meaning, grammar, or the unfamiliar concept, etc. We also need insights into the lookup habits, because the users inform us where they look up and if they are happy with what they find in the existing dictionaries. So the critical comments about other dictionaries helped us to tell we needed to do things differently. It is also interesting how prescriptive and descriptive people want their information, and the intuition some of the answers contained as to what people find in a dictionary, and it contradicts their own intuition they have. So we learn a lot about expectations on norm, as we said, established as linguistic norm, or experience as language use as we face it. So the acceptance of new terms, you could learn in those answers usually as well. We learn about the advice given by other people. And we had a lot of experience with users' interest during the COVID pandemic. And we learned then that users demand quick consultation on current issues and not 5 years later. So that was the main motivation to change the definition. This is what it's more like now. It's a new lexical unit in our new project, or a new sense of an established lexical unit that emerges at a certain stage of language development in a speech community. It spreads, it carries communicative and discursive weight at a given time. And that is the influence of COVID and other discourses. It is documented in real language use as represented by different text types, not just newspapers, and in different linguistic varieties. And the things that I underlined are the things that were important to me and the users in the language forums. Why not established, integrated, and accepted as norm? I said this, we want to capture a new word when users are unfamiliar with the new word. When they are not aware of exactly what the linguistic attributes are or the underlying concept is. And our aim was twofold now, for consultation and documentation. It means new words must be attested frequently. We must overcome the press corpus bias. We need to integrate some of the words while they're still in the progress of being integrated, grammatically, for example. We also want to include words that are not fully in the speaker's mental lexicon, because they are not established yet. And we want new words when they play a certain critical role in the daily public communication, even if it's just for a certain amount of time. We never know how long they're going to stay. Even if the documentation, as in the old dictionary, happens 5 years later, they might disappear after 10 years. So we never really know when they disappear. And that is an option we keep ourselves open to. The word might disappear again after some time. It might remain a trend word, then it's documented. But it had a specific role at a specific time. So our new definition is different. When you look at the phases starting from the birth or appearance until it's fully lexicalized, the old dictionary was descriptive and retrospective, and it only took the words when they reached the final stage. The new dictionary starts roughly here, although the categories or the phases are overlapping here, what's in the middle. When the frequency and dispersion is growing, when it starts compounding or being used creatively, when it establishes itself in the speech community. So we start a lot earlier. This is when people look up information. This is when people ask what the words mean. So I think I have to hurry up a bit. The old dictionary neologisms needed to be fully lexicalized. They don't need to be lexicalized fully right now. They need to have an established spelling. They can still have variable spelling because it can take years and years and years to finally reach the final spelling. Established in pronunciation, it can still be variable today. No flagging, such as so-called things. It can still have flagging. It had usually before established gender for nouns. The gender can still be variable when we discover it. Fully established inflection paradigm. We have a number of terms that have incomplete inflection paradigm, and it might remain so for 20 years or more. And with word formation products, we take them with or without word formation products. It doesn't matter. As Annette said some years ago, some candidates remain in the database for further monitoring for several years. Other candidates directly become entries in the dictionary, and they had a cutoff point in that candidate list after 500. I use additional lists of tokens which have moved up in the list of significance below 500. I can see that from year to year, sometimes they were quite below and then they move up suddenly. So I check my lists, take out the list from the previous year, look what happened to that, and I check all candidates. So that's different. Now we come to the semantic transparency. The old dictionary left out transparent compounds such as Eurokrise, crisis because of a weak euro. I take those in because they're very constitutive for a specific discourse, and that was very important to me, the discourse function of neologism. Energiepreiskrise, the crisis because of rising energy costs, is part of the new neologism dictionary because it's important to the energy crisis. And people want to know exactly when that energy crisis was, what kind of historical events are associated with it, and look it up there. So that wouldn't be in the old dictionary. Synonyms were left out, only listed under a major head word. We take them in when they are similarly frequent and when they have different semantic or syntactic properties, because these are the attributes people are asking as well. The generic masculine noun was only taken in the old one, leaving out feminine forms. We take in the feminine form as well. And what we have in common with the old neologism dictionary is no proper nouns unless they are derivatives of them, like book talk and the book talker. So we would take in book talker even though it's derived from a proper noun. Okay. So I do this pretty quickly here. Judith, this is your doing. The dictionarization matrix is extremely useful. It's very good for comparison of different projects. And this matrix was developed for a general dictionary. So there are quite some differences in our case because it's a neologism dictionary. Oh, it helps to prioritize, I must say that, or evaluate different options based on the criteria we have. It helps to assess the strengths and weaknesses of the chosen criteria. I'm quite aware that some of the criteria are more pragmatic than reasonable, really, but we have to make a choice here. But it helps us to tell us where the weak points are, really. So Judith has different criteria of use, and I just listed how we fulfill them. And what is in red, some explanations and where I would add something. For example, the regional spread plays a particular role when we look at Austrian and Swiss texts, for example, that needs to be covered. And the suggestion by the speech community is in red here. Yes, we take that into consideration when we failed to detect it automatically or semi-automatically, which is not very often the case, but it does happen, okay? I quickly go through this, but I'm almost done anyway. Then you have the linguistic and thematic criteria, the completion of semantic series and thematic fields, and I wanted to add the completion of a discourse field. You can imagine now, because for the dashboard, that's quite important. Just to give you an example here, the verbs that refer to politicians and their behavior or communication, we would basically fill these up if we have some of these. The thematic series, words designating internet technology, for example, or the discourse, we would also collect systematically words that refer to the war in Ukraine. So the completion of discourse fields, thematic series, or semantic series is important to us as well. And criteria of documentation, that differs quite a bit. As a neologism dictionary that attempts to discover words quickly and put them in the dictionary, I cannot wait for specialized dictionaries. I would never have them there. I cannot wait when they occur in general dictionaries, because people expect new terms in a neologism dictionary to be quicker in there than in general dictionaries. And appearance in corpora, yes, it's quite important. In the corpora and outside our corpora, we need different resources here. Appearance in other dictionaries of other languages is not relevant to us. So it was really nice. Yeah, it was really nice to have this matrix just to check where we are really and to see how it corresponds to what we have. And I would love to come back to that matrix in more detail, because I think in my head there are more criteria which I need to adjust and put in there to have a specific matrix for a specific dictionary. And those criteria might not apply to other dictionaries, I must say that. Do users care about inclusion criteria is a big question. Yes, they do. When you can learn so much about the user in language forums. Why is the term fortnight not in Duden, the most established brand for dictionaries in German? Are words which are not in Duden automatically neologisms? Why is every new word always an Anglicism? And how do new words develop or occur or things like that? So there are a lot of questions concerning neologisms here. And as a lexicographer, we should think about how to inform or sensitize users about the inclusion criteria, how to inform and sensitize users about our definition criteria as well. What are neologisms? And we also should inform and sensitize users about real facts. We try to do that with the charts in the dashboard, because people think all the neologisms are Anglicisms, even in German now, which is not the case at all. And we should inform and sensitize users about language use and language change and ways of integration into vocabulary. And that's why it's also nice to integrate them when they are not fully lexicalized, but on their way to be integrated as well. And that's, I think, almost the end. What else do? We do a lot of research on processes of lexicalization, integration, lexical competition. We have done some studies on the acceptability of non-related neologisms, so new native word versus loan translation versus new loan words, things like that. And we also investigate preferences of lexical items in related neologism pairs. And I strongly look into neologism together with the corpus-assisted critical discourse approach. I look at neologism and their functions and impact in contrastive analysis in specific discourses. Just a list of selected publications. Annette Kloser-Kückelhaus has worked on some of these studies quite a bit. We, at the moment, have 2 PhD projects on semantic similarity and impact on lexical change, and on morphological integration of English-derived verbs. And all of us in the project are part of ENEOLI, in the European Network on the Lexical Innovation, and I am coordinating the task group Neology and Discourse. And now that you listen to the presentation, that might not come as a surprise, I suppose. So I'm done. I'm done, and I'm very thirsty. I need something.
Thank you very much. You can drink something. Your presentation was very complete, very clear, and very stimulating. There is so much to do with neologisms, and we still have some minutes for discussion. So it means that you can raise your hand. I think we have some hands, or if you prefer, we can write it on the chat and we will read it. I think we have one hand, which is Anna. Perhaps you could stop sharing and we will see each other easier. Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, Petra, that was amazing, very fascinating to me. Thank you so much. You were so right. The amount of information was a lot. I only have one question concerning the pipeline that you described when detecting and including new works. This whole work sounds massive, really. But maybe this is a naive question, I don't know, and forgive me if it is, but couldn't some of these manual edits, as you described them, be automated somehow? For example, when you detect inflectional variations, couldn't this be done by running the list through a morphological lexicon, something like that, and grouping them together?
Probably. Some of it, probably, yes. Well, the simple search options help me to conduct that quite easily. The inflectional forms, that's not such a big problem. Finding the synonyms within the list is much more problematic. I get quicker year by year due to experience. It is extremely time-consuming and laborious, yes. Sometimes I take the advantage of some of the students or interns I have here to go through the list together, and then we kind of compare what we've done. I'm not aware of any tools that could support me fully, but I'm happy if you can name a few. I'm happy to have a look at that.
Okay, I'll check it. We have our internal tools, but for example, I know that a lot of people collect, like you said, the proper names, which should be out, and they have this huge list and they compare the two, and when they find similarities, they throw them away automatically, for example.
The proper nouns are quite easy because I had one column that says, what's the likelihood of this term being a proper noun? So in my candidate list, that is a strong indication already. So the proper nouns are quite easy. And you got after a time, you get a good feeling of what a proper noun is, really. So the proper nouns are massive, but not a big problem as such. So, yeah. It is just making the decision in the end of what to take in and not. We roughly manage to do 100 entries a year. And now I come back to the selection criteria, the feasibility. So roughly 100 a year means we have to select at some point. All of those have more than 100 hits in the corpus. So we never struggle with frequency, really. We have plenty of data supporting the examination of the terms. But yes, I would love to include more. And if I have too many automatic tools, I never get more workforce, really, for my projects. So I would love to approach something like 200, which isn't feasible at the moment, but it's a more realistic picture of what is quite dominant when it comes to new terms in the language per year.
Okay, I have, before Tansan, something in the chat. Someone is asking if everyone can introduce when they have a question. It was Anna Bakalopoulou from the Greek Institution of Language.
Language and speech processing. I'm sorry, I forgot about that.
Okay. And Marcel Lorente, who is a senior member from our group, she said, thank you very much, Petra, for your presentation. It has given me quite a few thoughts. Excuse me, but I have to leave the seminar now, and she left. And now, Vincent, please.
Yes, thanks again, Petra. And indeed, I should ask my question at the end because you answer it. But I have another question. If I understand everything you said, for me the most important is that you took you take into consideration the social dimension of neologisms, and that very great idea. But how do you manage to I mean, if a word is transparent, there is no need from users to get some explanations, because a word like Corona-Behandlung or COVID treatment, in other languages, for example, in French, it won't be a word. It will be only a syntagm. So for me, I wouldn't say that it is a neologism, because there is no need to ask what it means, and it's transparent. But it's quite important when you make your network of different new words in a social relevant theme. So how do you... Wie ziehen Sie sich da aus der Affäre? How do you fix it?
Yeah. Frequency has a lot to do with it. So if it's ranked quite highly in my list, then it's quite, and it shows quite some controversy in public debates and discussions, and I can see that in newspaper texts when it comes to different political positions, for example, different parties talking about one and the same thing from different angles. Then I include them, even though they are semantically transparent, because I want to include that position, that discursive potential, to see how relevant it was.
But that means, for example, es gibt this term of Schlagwort, a very important word in the society. And in German, all the compounds will begin with this Schlagwort. So Corona, Corona A, Corona B, Corona C, Corona D, etc., etc.
Well, of course, I cannot.
That means everything you would interpret all these themes, and there are hundreds or thousands of these themes like neologism, although they are not seen like this from the community of speakers.
I'm not sure they are not seen like that, because we quite closely watch what's going on in language forums, and the questions there also concern transparent compounds quite a bit, because people want to know if they can use, if they have the appropriate amount of knowledge when they want to use a specific term, or if they on purpose want to avoid a term in order not to be associated with a specific political position, for example. So that's why that was one of the ideas of including the position, so people can pick really or get themselves informed. Yes, of course, it means we cannot include every single transparent, discursive, relevant Schlagwort keyword as such. But we try our best. What can I say? We have to compromise. Yes, yes. But the most dominant ones are in there.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
We still have a minute for a last question. We have several people that are leaving, and in the chat they are saying thank you, Petra, for such a thorough presentation. And Giovanni Talarico, thank you, Petra, for showing the importance of a qualitative approach when dealing with an impressive quantity of data. And okay, we are going to leave. Do we have another question? Because I have one. It's again about the definition of neologism, not in the old one, but in the new one. There is information that says, and carries communicative and discourse weight at given time.
Yeah.
So, what does it mean? How can we decide this weight, and what happens after this given time?
We cannot predict the given time, but we see in the corpus if a specific debate on something is strong, it remains, or it starts to disappear slowly, or it might gain weight again after a few years. The discursive weight is exactly what I meant by taking different positions from a political point of view. And this is so apparent now because most of the neologisms are so crisis related. They are not just terms designated to technological advancements. They are crisis terms. And as such, they are never neutral. Most of them are not neutral. And there is a lot of emotions behind most of these terms. And that gives them this discursive weight because people talk about them so much more than about technological advancements at the moment. And the inflation and the prices and what it does on your budgets and how people with the low income cannot cope with their energy prices on the one hand, or some businesses are collapsing due to the energy prices they face and things like that. It's big in the news and it's debated about quite immensely from different perspectives, from the Green political party, which was part of the government, from the opposition, from right-wing movements as well. So this controversy can be easily detected in newspapers. And that's the weight. That's what I meant by discursive weight, the controversies and the positions.
Yeah, I love
And it might not have been the case in the 90s when all these terms for internet technology came up and all was seen as progress and as brilliant new designs and technology facilities. But at the moment, discourse or critical discourse is very prominent due to the crises we have.
Yeah. Okay, so we have to say goodbye to everyone. And thanks again, Petra.
I thank you.
It's been a pleasure. We feel very.
Thanks a lot for listening, for coming along.